Mark chapter 2, starting in verse 23, and the remainder of the chapter, and the first 6 verses of chapter 3. I didn't really want to turn this on just yet because I wanted to report to you that Buddy don't like cones. Maddie didn't have to wear a cone. She wore one. She was big enough to wear one of my T-shirts. I intentionally keeping this short tonight because it'll give us some time to possibly discuss our most recent visiting preacher. In Mark chapter 2, verse 23, and it came to pass that he went through the cornfields of the Sabbath day, and his disciples began as they went to pluck the ears of corn. And the Pharisees said unto him, Behold, why do they on the Sabbath day that which is not lawful? And he said unto them, Have you never read what David did when he had need and was an hungered, he and they that were with him, how he went into the house of God in the days of Abiathar the high priest, and did eat the showbread, which is not lawful to eat, but for the priest, and gave also to them which were with him. And he said unto them, The Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. Therefore the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath. And then in chapter 3, he entered again into the synagogue, and there was a man there which had a withered hand. And they watched him, whether he would heal him on the Sabbath day, that they might accuse him. And he saith unto the man which had the withered hand, Stand forth. And he saith unto them, Is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath day, or to do evil, to save life, or to kill? But they held their peace. And when he had looked around about on them with anger, being grieved for the hardness of their hearts, he said unto the man, Stretch forth thine hand. And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored whole as the other. And the Pharisees went forth, and straightway took counsel with the Herodians against him, how they might destroy him. Now, Jesus had begun to try and show Israel the better way that was coming. We have to recognize, and the book of Hebrews tells us very plainly, everything about the new covenant is better. It's a better covenant. We have a better priest. We have a better, it's a better everything. And so he is beginning to teach, and even though he has come to fulfill the old covenant and fulfill the law to its letter, he's also teaching the coming new way. And so where we begin, it says, They came to pass that he went through the fields, through the cornfields on the Sabbath day, and his disciples began as they went to pluck the ears of corn. And the Pharisees said unto him, Behold, why do they on the Sabbath day that which is not lawful? Why do they on the Sabbath day that which is not lawful? In beginning, we first of all, we need to notice this. First of all, we notice how closely the Pharisees are watching him. And this is fairly early in his ministry. And they're watching him and his disciples, and they're looking for any kind of excuse to accuse him and to discredit him. And, well, obviously, they were lawyers. I'll not get started on lawyers. As he and his disciples were walking through a field of corn, more likely wheat. Most people, if they had a choice, would not walk through a cornfield because you come out itching and scratching. But at any rate, it's likely wheat, and they're pulling off handfuls of grain, and they're eating it. They're just pulling the heads off, and they're going like this, and they're eating it. And this simply did not slip past the Pharisees' watchful eye. They are, like I said, they are watching him very closely. I'll throw this in while I'm at it. I have found, or at least I've been told, and kind of found the same thing that usually is so. People who yell the loudest over someone else's sin is usually hiding some sin of their own. And according to Jesus, he simply said the Pharisees strained at a gnat to swallow a camel. In Matthew chapter 23, verse 23 and 24, he says, "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith. These ought you to have done, and not to leave the other undone. You blind guides which strain at a gnat and swallow a camel." I'll stop for just a minute and comment on this. Sometimes people use this to discredit the idea of tithing. But Jesus, when he talked to them, just said, "You've omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith." And he went on to say, "But you ought to still do this. You ought to do both." But they were critical of the disciples, and they were critical of the disciples not because they took grain from someone else's field, because gleaning was legal. They considered the plucking of the grain as manual labor. And you're not supposed to work on the Sabbath. It's important that we recognize this because it bears a part in the answer that Jesus gives them. In Leviticus chapter 23, it tells us of the Sabbath day, and the law says, chapter 23, verse 3, 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of rest and holy convocation. Ye shall do no work therein. It is the Sabbath of the Lord in all your dwellings. Now, if we follow that back, it goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 2 and verse 3, when it says, God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. God wasn't tired. We need to understand that. God wasn't tired. He consecrated the Sabbath day because he had finished his work. And as we continue on, when the children of Israel began to gather manna in the wilderness, when they left Egypt, and they went they went out a ways, and all of a sudden they're hungry and said, "Hey, we ain't got nothing to eat." And so when they began to gather manna, God gave them manna, and they gathered on 6 days, and on the 6th day, 6th, that's with the TH. Sometimes my Southern just won't spit stuff out like it's supposed to sound. But on the 6th day, they gathered enough for the 7th. Any other day that they gathered more than they needed, the manna would spoil overnight. But on the 6th day, it would remain fresh for them to eat on the 7th, so that they did no gathering. Now, his answer, this, and we need to understand something. I hope you get this. the Sabbath day was set apart for man to rest. To rest. Dan, you go 7 days at Boeing, you're tired. Homer, you ain't going to Ford anymore, but when you were, if you went 7 days on the, you're tired. God knew that. Guess what? He made us, and He understands we need it. The Sabbath was never intended. The Sabbath was never intended to take precedence over human needs. And I want you to notice he speaks about David. But again, what he's trying to tell us is the Sabbath was made for man. It was made for us, not man for the Sabbath. And he says that very plainly. But he mentions here David, and he says, when he was in need and was hungered, he went and ate the showbread from the tabernacle and gave also to those that was with him. This is not intended as an excuse for us to say, well, I got corn in the field, or I've got this, or I've got that, so I need to do this. But rather, it's simply intended to show us that God made this for man. Therefore, the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath, he says in verse 28. Jesus came and he looked on the form of a man he came and took the form of a man to fulfill the law to its nth degree, I might say, because man could not. And then fulfilling the law, he gave his life as a ransom for our lives. But we need to remember this, he says, therefore the Sabbath being made for man makes Jesus Lord of the Sabbath. And all of that applies to us too. We belong to Him. Kyrios is a word we use many times as Lord. It simply means one to whom a person or thing belongs, to have authority over. And we belong to Him, but the Sabbath belongs to Him too. He is Lord over the Sabbath. I suspect that Jesus led them through that whatever field it was. I doubt it was corn. In fact, I didn't see a cornfield all the time we was over there. Maybe somebody had some sweet corn out in the garden. I don't know, but there's a good chance he led them through there because he knew. He knew that the Pharisees was watching. And he gives them this fine lesson. He continues on in chapter 3, and the reason that we are bleeding over into chapter 3 is because this all goes together. This is all one thought. And it says, and he entered again into the synagogue, and there was a man there which had a withered hand. And they watched him. They didn't just casually give him a side eye. They were watching him very closely. It says they watched him, whether he would heal him on the Sabbath day, that they might accuse him. And he saith unto the man, notice he deals with the man first. He deals with us first. He'll deal with the naysayers later. He deals with us first. He saith unto the man which had the withered hand, stand forth. And he saith unto them, is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath days, or to do evil, to save life or to kill? But they held their peace. I kind of see them standing like this. We have the same scenario as chapter 2. They're concerned about what he's going to do on the Sabbath, and he has already made it plain the Sabbath was made to serve man, not vice versa. If I fell down out of this stage, split my head open on the table, and was laying there bleeding, and you had the power to stop the bleeding and to bandage me up, would it be good or evil for you to walk away and do nothing? Jesus is there with the power to heal this man. And he just looked at him and asked, is it good to do, is it good to do, is it right to do good on the Sabbath, or is it right to do evil? Scenario, I'm laying down there bleeding. You walk away, that's evil. He added to save a life or to kill. In Matthew's account of this, he said, what man shall there be among you that shall have one sheep? Oh, now we're talking money. And it fall into a pit on the Sabbath day, will he not lay hold on it and lift it out? How much then is a man better than a sheep? Y'all all probably know by now I got a new dog. I had no intentions of ever getting another dog. Nothing will ever compare to Maddie. There just are no more Maddies. But I see on Facebook all the time, as much as I love Maddie, and I'm beginning to take a shine to this knothead. But I see on Facebook all the time they're crossing the Rainbow Bridge and they're waiting on you on the other side. That's not so. Man is the crown of God's creation. Man is the only creature on the earth that has a soul. And so then he says, how much then is a man better than a sheep? Wherefore is it lawful to do well on the Sabbath days? No. Wherefore it is lawful to do well on the Sabbath days. He's the authority. Matthew's account as a king, he's an authority. He says it is lawful to do well on the Sabbath days. Mark's account asks the question, in Matthew's he asks and then he answers it for them. Matthew's writing about a king and Mark's writing about a servant. But nonetheless, the same thing stands. These hypocrites were so bound on accusing him that they would not listen to this explanation. Folks, any rational human being could understand the logic in the Lord's words, but they were not listening. They held their peace. They didn't care about that man. They cared about what Jesus was going to do. And when he looked around about on them with anger, the Lord got angry. The Lord didn't get angry the way we get angry. We get angry because it's either benefits or harms us. The Lord got angry when people didn't care. Being grieved he was angry with anger, looking on them with anger, being grieved for the hardness of their hearts. He saith unto the man, stretch forth thine hand, and he stretched it out, and his hand was restored whole as the other. And the Pharisees went forth and straightway took counsel with the Herodians against him, how they might destroy him. You know, I'm about to wind this up just pretty shortly, but it amazes me. Y'all have heard me say for years that I'm absolutely positively convinced that the religious leaders knew who they were, who he was, and they did not want him. And they were doing everything they could to discredit him. This callous unconcern for this man's plight made the Lord angry. You don't care about this man. I love him. I don't even know him, but I love him. We see in this that there are things that we can be angry about and not sin. It both saddened me and kind of made me a little angry today when they killed this good man just because they didn't like what he had to say. Once again, I'll remind you that as Mark writes to us of the Lord's service to the Father, he provides for us the perfect example. We should have righteous indignation at sin. We should have righteous indignation of, I read some of these things. I read some of the comments about this man's death and what the left is having to say. It makes me mad that they can be so callous and so the Lord's anger was over their total blindness of God's love. Their own, and they were wrapped up in their own smug self-righteousness. And it says he was grieved at the hardness of their hearts. And so he tells the man, stretch out your hand. You dummies, watch this. And he healed him. What better day than the day of rest to be healed? But anyway, we're told the Pharisees took counsel with the Herodians to destroy Jesus. Who were the Herodians? The Herodians were Edomites. Their ancestry was Edomites. They hated each other, but they joined with them to try and destroy Jesus. And this all, all of this just to me goes back to something that I've just said over and over and over. Religious leaders of Israel knew who he was, and they callously rejected him. So in the end of his ministry, his earthly ministry, he looked at them and he says, I've rejected you. The kingdom is taken from you and given to a nation bearing the fruit thereof. And I'm through. I'm going to cut this off.